Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Razam Pereira. Facial recognition has become a cause for concern in Western democracies. The European Commission is considering imposing a 5-year moratorium on the use of facial recognition technologies in the EU. In the United States, municipalities have passed or are considering passing prohibitions. India, however, is rushing to adopt public facial recognition. Facial recognition systems have been active at several major Indian airports, including the Delhi airport. These systems at airports have been installed under the Digi Yatra initiative. Telangana's Election Commission piloted a facial recognition app in its civic elections on January 22nd and claimed that it could address the issue of voter impersonation. Facial recognition is a biometric technology that uses distinctive features on the face to identify and distinguish an individual. From the first cameras that could recognize faces in the mid-1960s up to now, facial recognition has evolved in many ways. From looking at 3D contours of a face to recognizing skin patterns. With machine learning, the technology has become capable of sorting out types of faces. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the uses and concerns of facial recognition. Joining me on the program today are J. Sai Deepak, advocate of the Supreme Court, Anuj Agarwal, a cyber forensics and data privacy expert, and he's also chairman, Center for Research of Cybercrime and Cyber Law. And also joining us on the program is Dr. Vikram Singh, former DGP, Uttar Pradesh. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Anuj Agarwal, I'd like to begin the program with you. Let's first try and understand what facial recognition technology is. How is it integrated into the larger system and how do authorities use it?
See, the facial recognition system works primarily on looking at the face through the camera, and then it has a lot of algorithm built in the background using the various kind of softwares to reconstruct using that figure which has come from the camera and is storing it into a database, and then that database can be integrated with any kind of a software which may involve security, as well as, for example, you want to provide some banking services or maybe election commission, or you want to provide some service at the airport. So that is the way it is working. Now the challenge here is that the face may be covered, or it may have different facets. For example, somebody has grown a beard, somebody has aged from where the last time the photo has been taken. So those kind of things are also there in the software to take care, and this is becoming one of the good way to really recognize a person without fail. So I think this is one of the good upcoming technologies.
Okay, all right. Dr. Vikram Singh, how is the technology used by the police and the authorities? Does it make the lives of the cops simpler?
Well, I would say that it does make the life very simple, in the sense that you have just 144 constables per 1 lakh citizens, which is a very pathetic kind of a ratio. And this is a force multiplier, an excellent technology. Like any technology, it has its infirmities too. And the first infirmity is, like any technology, it is not infallible. There are hiccups, there are certain things that, but as a force multiplier, it is a success story in very many countries. I would not like to name them for obvious reasons, but it is a success story. But anything that has a success rate of almost 75% is good enough to be implemented and adapted. Take the example of photography. Do you think for a moment that photography is infallible? No. There are those who put on, undergo plastic surgeries. There are those who put such gaudy and heavy makeup so as to conceal the important parts of their physiognomy, so as to conceal and get away from proper identification and identification parades. These are common happening things in identification parades that happen in the course of investigation in jails and in the courts. Therefore, I would say that this, like any other system, is one of the very good systems that we have at hand. It does not require too much of manpower. It requires not regular upgradation. Once the technology is in place, the manpower trained, I feel that it is very good without much of human interface and much of human handling. And wherever it has been implemented, whether it is authentication or recognition or both, I think it is a success story and needs to be implemented faithfully everywhere. It comes at a cost. Obviously, artificial intelligence and cloud computing do not come cheap. Upgradation also comes at a price. But I think we have experts who can tell us how best to take it forward. And I think this is the way forward. We cannot compare ourselves with European Union. Their problems are different. Our problems are very different. You have a problem at hand in Delhi. And I wish we had some system like this. We would not have cut a very sorry figure as we are doing now.
Okay, that having been said, Dr. Singh, I have a follow-up question for you. You also spoke about how it makes the lives of the policeman far more simpler. But is this the real answer to some of the problems that the entire police force is facing? Dr. Singh?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I was saying that I really don't know if the audio dropped or not, but I would say that it is a technology that's worth adapting. Like any technology, it has its infirmities and strengths. But I would say that the strengths far outweigh the weaknesses. It has been a success story in very many countries. Our problems are very different from those of the European Union, and European Union can have their own roadmap, but we have our own priorities and position. We just have 144 constables per 1 lakh people.
Correct.
And therefore this force multiplier is now no longer an option. I think we need to implement it, and the earlier we implement it, the better.
Okay.
Had we had these positions,
Dr.
these
Singh,
things in
we
position,
heard that
we would
out.
not have cut such a sorry figure.
I'm sorry to cut you short, but we heard that out, and we heard your entire, your entire opening remark as far as facial recognition technology is concerned. But I had a follow-up question. You spoke about how this can make the lives of the policeman far more simpler. But is this the answer to all the problems that the police force is facing?
This cannot be the total solution of all the problems, but a major solution to major problems. Obviously, no single technology. As a learned speaker had said, we are capable of changing our facial features. We can conceal and camouflage our facial features. We can undergo plastic surgery. We can also put on certain heavy makeup to conceal ourselves. Therefore, it has to be doubled up with human intelligence time and again. And in the most sensitive areas like VVIP security, it has to be doubled up with human intelligence and human complement as well.
Okay, all right. J. Sai Deepak, let me bring you in. You patiently heard out both the panelists ahead of you. But let's talk about regulation as far as this particular technology is concerned. It's still in its nascent stages. Do we have sufficient regulation as far as this technology is concerned?
So regulation, according to me, would involve, at least based on my limited understanding of the scope of use and the nature of the technology, would involve the following questions. One, what would be the sources from which images will be collected to create this repository or this database? And if this information is sought to be collected from, let's say, social media profiles, let's say Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, so on and so forth, then what kind of relationship would these private entities have with security agencies, and how would that reflect in the terms and conditions? And would those terms and conditions be fairly transparent in recording this particular fact that these images would be made available to enforcement agencies? Now, the fact remains that even otherwise, it is assumed and naturally to be assumed that when an enforcement agency seeks information with respect to a particular profile, then any of these private entities have to hand over that particular information as long as it comes from the competent authority. But will that information be sought under a specific arrangement, or will that be just sourced directly from publicly available profiles? So that's one. Second, what kind of safeguards will be put in place to ensure the integrity of the repository of the database which is created, so that it doesn't leak out, or it is not privatized, or it's not monetized? That's point number two. Point number three, assuming that this were to be ultimately used in a court of law during the course of a criminal trial or any particular legal proceeding, what kind of reliability or, let's say, admissibility in terms of standards would apply to this particular evidence? That's a question that we'll have to ask and answer. But I have to agree to a significant extent to what Dr. Singh has said before, that the way forward is certainly to use more technology, particularly in a country like India, given the size of its population and given that we are understaffed heavily. So we can't be analogous as far as this particular issue is concerned, and therefore more technology is the way forward, provided there are sufficient safeguards to address other concerns as well, including privacy concerns and whatnot. Okay, so there is no two ways about it. From what little I've understood so far, the 172-page document that the government released, the NCRB released, does not throw too much of light in terms of the regulation subject to which this particular system will be used. But I think that cannot be the scope of that particular document, because the document was meant for the consumption of providers of that particular equipment as opposed to the regulatory protocols. So I think the government is hoping to address the question of privacy, the question of the legal framework through the privacy regime, through the data privacy, let's say, protocol that we are actually, I think we are still in the process of looking at. So that could perhaps be the answer. But the pace at which we are incorporating technology which could have a bearing on privacy seems to be more than the pace at which we are actually putting in place the mechanism to protect privacy. So perhaps these concerns the government will have to address, because the government certainly has what is known as a legitimate state interest in the introduction of these technologies, because that falls within the broad police powers of the state. That is something that cannot be done away with. But how do you balance that with the constitutional requirement to protect a right which the Supreme Court has come to recognize as a fundamental right? These are two specific things that I think the government has to walk a tightrope on. And I have read a couple of news reports as well as a couple of policy papers where they are merely asking the government at this stage to reveal its mind with respect to what is its policy going to be on the question of privacy. Perhaps that is a question that the government must answer as quickly as possible, because if they don't do so, then the fear that this particular technology could be used for purposes more than what is stated publicly could be reinforced and strengthened. And given the current atmosphere, I don't think the government should feed that kind of fear and should try and address those questions as transparently and as expeditiously as possible. So this is something that I think the MeitY as well as the MLJ must make an attempt to address.
Okay, all right. Let me take a point that J. Sai Deepak was making forward with you, Anuj Agarwal. So where this information comes from, how this information is going to be used, where is it going to be stored? Of course, we trust the government, but what about the private sector?
See, this is a very big question, because when you store this kind of a data, the size is extremely huge, and it is not only 1 or 2 points where you are storing, and there would be at least thousands and thousands of points of collection. Now collecting so much huge data and then storing it for any kind of a meaningful image recognition later on will require huge network and huge data storage, which at this point of time is definitely not available in our country. We are even not able to store a typical government data by the NIC and the government agencies, and we are taking help of the international cloud service providers, which is again an issue. So at this point of time, the infrastructure is a major bottleneck and major issue. Second, obviously the security of that data, because so far we have seen that there had been breaches in data across the world, including the bigger security establishments in US and other places, including some of our country's sensitive installations. So this is another major area that unless we have a security framework which can give that kind of a confidence to the people, that becomes a major issue. Third, obviously the utilization, that if you store that data, if you collect that kind of a data or the faces, because it can lead to some sort of a misunderstanding, especially as Mr. Deepak said that the agencies may collect data from social profiles. Now all the data which is there on the social profiles is usually concocted. It has absolutely no authentication. Anybody can put anybody's photo and say it is my profile, it is my data. And all those videos which we see on the social media, many of them are doctored and no one really knows. So that's the third issue, which first of all we must understand and address, that how they can be tackled. So the privacy is a major issue, and fourth is the training. Now, okay, consider that everything is in place, the technology, the data, the security. How it will be utilized, whether we have people who are trained enough to understand the nitty-gritties of this kind of a data, are they sensitized already? So I think this is a very long way to go. Yes, it may help as a force multiplier, it may definitely help say in VVIP duties, but using it as at airports or for elections, it seems to be a little far-fetched. Some controlled experiments may work, that's fine when you have a very small sample data, 1 lakh people, 50,000, 20,000 or maybe 1,200 or 2,000 people at a particular booth. So that becomes easy. Or at an airport, which is obviously a very controlled environment. But if you are trying to use it at a place like Delhi, which is, which has huge population, moving population, pollution, people moving very fast, people are free to do whatever they want, I think it will take a lot of time, and we just cannot emulate examples from smaller countries like Israel or maybe a country like China. It won't work. So I think we need to be very, very careful, otherwise it will lead to a lot of unnecessary
All right.
issues.
All right, Dr. Singh. So, specific targeting, is that the best way forward? Could that also lead to mass surveillance? Because that seems to be a big question mark and a big, a big issue of contention, really, as far as several analysts are concerned.
The learned speakers have articulated their viewpoints very, very forcefully, with a lot of experience behind them and the greatest maturity. With due respect to them, I would say that the police application would come after intelligence operations and investigation work. For that, you require pinpointed information. I would say that there's a gangster by the name of Pujara, real life story. Pujara existed in some country and was absconding for many, many years. It was after painstaking, elaborate research, matching of photographs, and also the success story emerges that it was indeed the face recognition and also human intelligence coupled that Pujara was indeed arrested and now is extradited. That is one case. I give you a specific example of Delhi. NCRB has immense and a whole lot of data in respect of communal writers, gundas, rapists, and everyone. If suppose this data is almost 100,000, it will be much, much more than that. And if we program through artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and other tools in the arsenal to work out what is happening in the disturbed areas, I think just a 30-degree facial interaction with the CCTV camera, duly equipped, would give the police very great and significant and important lead, which can be game changers. My simple submission is that this is the technology should be put to training. One learned speaker before me said that training is important. Yes, training is most important, because if there is no proper training, it can be put to disuse, misuse, and not optimum use. So before it lapses into misuse and disuse, proper training with those who have some background of IT work, some background of handling IT material, and also are interested in the task rather than thana work. They should be tasked, trained, and then motivated to do this task. Because it's a sensitive data, storage of this data, so that it doesn't fall into the wrong kinds of hands, because it has tremendous potential of being misused for blackmail and other nefarious activities. To that extent, I would totally agree with my learned speakers that the constitutional mandate of right of privacy will have to be safeguarded and ensured through letter and spirit. But the wonderful tool that we have at our hands, I think we need to give it a try, because it is a success story in very many countries. If it has been made successful, obviously, there cannot be cut and dried solutions for Israel and China, and there cannot be cut and dried solutions for India. We have to customize this technology for India, and I think we need to give it a try.
Okay, we need to give it a try. Let's have specific targeting and see how it goes, and then probably learn as we go along the process is also what the panelists are suggesting. But J. Sai Deepak, you touched upon it in your introductory remarks. Dr. Singh also spoke about it, right to privacy. What about an individual's right to privacy here?
So let's put it this way. Since you refer to mass surveillance, the one thing that we have to understand is there is already mass surveillance thanks to the fact that there are CCTV cameras everywhere. Okay. So I don't think facial recognition is strictly bringing in an element of mass surveillance which already does not exist. This is primarily a compare and contrast tool meant for identification based on existing information, or to create a repository on the basis of which the process of identification can be accelerated. So assume for a moment that there is a CCTV camera in a certain place where a certain crime or an offense has been committed. As opposed to people spending time in trying to identify a certain person, in the absence of a certain database, the idea is to provide a certain backend on the basis of which the software can perform this without human intervention. And to that extent, if you limit human intervention, human error is also reduced, and also motivated human intervention can also be reduced to that particular extent. Of course, this is something that I say without getting into the pitfalls of this particular technology or its drawbacks or its limitations at this point of time. I'm merely saying the use of the word mass surveillance with respect to this particular recognition system may be a bit of a hyperbole, because it may not be something that is limited to this, that it already exists. That's point number one. Two, is it necessary for India? I would certainly say it is necessary for India, but as you said, I don't think it can be the silver bullet to all the police reforms that we need. 3, whenever you're looking at these kind of issues, there is always a certain amount of compromise that we make. That is, what is societal interest and what is the extent of encroachment with respect to individual rights. That is always the compromise and the balance that you strike. So there is no doubting the fact that with this particular technology, perhaps there is a bit more of concession that we give with respect to individual privacy. But is that necessary? Is that warranted? Is the extent to which that concession is made proportionate to the kind of benefit that we get at the end of the day is the simple question. 3, I would certainly caution about one thing. So assume for a moment if it's Israel or China or United States or Europe, fortunately or unfortunately, those countries are in a situation where they're in a position to generate their own vendors, their own technology suppliers, and they've reached that particular stage. I think today China is number 2, or perhaps last year it overtook the United States in the number of patents that was filed with respect to artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Yes, it did.
If that is the case, we as India are still we rely on foreign suppliers as far as this technology is concerned. To what extent will a foreign entity have access to this information? How do we protect it? And 2, whether we like it or not every multinational corporation is necessarily an independent entity. It could be a tool or a puppet in the hands of some other entity. Therefore, how do we protect the Indian interest, both national as well as the individual? That's a question that we have to answer. But I'm not going to let's say downplay the need for this particular technology, or at the very least to start on this particular path to see how much it works. Perhaps the one thing that we can do from the Aadhaar experience is not implement it at such a massive scale that it becomes a fait accompli at a later stage, that we invest so much of money and we are not in a position to take it back. Perhaps we start with sensitive areas, as sir rightly pointed out, start with the targeted implementation, test it for its ability to identify and its error, and then you try and see to what places you can extend the scope of its application. That is something that perhaps they can start doing, as opposed to making it the norm for every kind of offense. Perhaps you start it with certain sensitive installations which are controlled in a certain way to see if it is in a position to handle a controlled flow of population, and then see if it is good for mass application. Until then, perhaps we must approach it cautiously, but nevertheless give it a shot.
Okay, all right, time to get closing comments now. Dr. Singh, before I let you go, a closing remark from you on the best way forward.
I think it is best to start with the pilot project and evaluate all the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Remembering that we had problems with BlackBerry, we still have problems with Facebook and WhatsApp. Then before we venture into the unknown territory with IBM, Google and Amazon, who are probably the fittest vendors as of now, let us hasten slowly. And before we adapt any technology, there are obviously hazards and also advantages. Let us go in for a proper roadmap. Hiccups are going to be there, but at the same time, the country needs the state-of-the-art technology.
Okay, all right. Anuj Agarwal, you know, as far as this, at the end of the day, it's technology, artificial intelligence. You know, we are lagging behind really as far as artificial intelligence is concerned. How do we take this along in the right way?
I think, as you very rightly said, we are lagging, but we have the potential. We are the biggest IT workforce in the world. So maybe this is the right time for us to start experimenting with our own technology. So far we haven't done it, and in terms of social media, we are having so much of a problem getting data. For criminal investigations, the support from Facebook, the Gmail is absolutely nothing. It's not at all coming. Now this is going to become another such area where the data is collected using their technology, some international vendor. It is mostly used, stored using their cloud servers. So you will have some or the other problem in effectively utilizing it. So this is the right time to go start with your own technology, since you are starting. You are not already there. Once you are already there, you will have your data given, your technology given, you will be in their hands. So just hold on, put a little serious effort. This is not something which we cannot do. We can do a rocket, we can do a nuclear bomb, we can do a artificial intelligence for this technology also easily. So I think this is the right time. We do it, we develop our own technology, we put our own servers, storage servers, and then go whole hog, use it. So with our own experience, as we mature using this technology with some difficulties, we can make corrective amendments quickly. Otherwise, the vendors will push whatever they have successfully utilized in their countries. We will just be consuming halfway, and the results will be, I will not say disastrous, but of course, the return will be much lesser than what is expected, and people will be extremely unhappy, as we are seeing, especially the police forces, which are extremely unhappy with the social media experiment. Everybody is using, except police is not getting information from them. So I don't want this kind of a scenario to develop. Let's take your own time, maybe 6 months, 12 months. Go whole hog with Indian technology only. There is absolutely no way to depend on the multinational technology. No way.
Okay, all right. And Jay Sai Deepak, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
With proper safeguards, I think it's a technology that is much needed for India. But I would fondly hope that we at least embark on the process, or at least on the path of indigenization when it comes to critical technologies which have a bearing on privacy. And perhaps it's time for the government to take R&D on this particular issue fairly seriously. And when we have the best of brains which seem to be occupying the highest of positions in these organizations from whom we are buying this product, why don't we try and develop this indigenously from within the country as much as possible, so that our reliance on foreign technology as well as our faith that we put in these foreign entities is brought down to a significant extent. I think, as Sir rightly said, given that we have the largest IT workforce, perhaps it's time that we started delivering the goods by coming out with products more than just services.
Okay, all right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that it is critical technology. It's technology that we would like to be seen being developed here within the country itself. Probably the government also invests heavily in R&D and takes it forward, like we've seen with ISRO and the nuclear bomb as well. So that's the best way forward, is what the panelists are suggesting. It's a technology, it's a nascent technology. There's still a long way to go, but with the right kind of direction and with the right kind of push, we can ensure that it is the best technology in the hands of the government, is what the panelists are suggesting. With that, it's a wrap. See you again next time.